Hey guys, tonight we begin a tale so profoundly uneventful, so deeply rooted in the minor inconveniences of daily life, that you probably won't survive this without drifting off at least twice. You wake up in a dim attic in Renaissance, Florence, wooden beams overhead, the dusty light of dawn creeping through a single cracked window, and the unmistakable realization that your left sock is gone. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stretch your legs, blink sleep from your eyes, and reach down to adjust your socks. Except, there's only one. Your right foot is cozily swaddled in slightly musty wool. Your left is bare, cold, vulnerable. Offended, you look around. No sign of the sock. You turn your straw mattress upside down. Nothing. You shake out your tunic and pat down your threadbare cloak. Nada. The sock has vanished devoured. Perhaps by the night. Or possibly stolen. Probably not by ghosts. Probably. You shuffle stiffly to the edge of your attic and peek out the tiny shuttered window. Florence buzzes gently beneath you, already humming with the day's promise of bread, art, and low-level corruption. A breeze lifts the corner of a neighbor's laundry line, and your eyes narrow. There, fluttering tantalizingly among a sea of chemises and scandalously large bloomers, is that your sock. It's definitely sock-shaped. It's definitely moving, and someone's definitely taking it. You slap on your sandals, yes, sandals with one sock, the height of Florentine tragedy, and swing out the window with more enthusiasm than grace. The rooftop tiles are slick with early dew and pigeon business. You skid, recover, and begin your chase. Your target, a gangly figure in a floppy hat, leaping across the rooftops with the suspicious grace of someone deeply committed to stealing socks. You scramble after them, panting, dodging chimney smoke and the occasional angry goose. Florence's skyline unfolds around you, terracotta roofs, bell towers, domes, beautiful, inconvenient. Your quarry disappears over a ledge, but not before tucking your sock into a bag full of other mismatched, mildly stained hosiery. So, this isn't random. This is systemic. You drop down into a courtyard, a noble woman's courtyard. Judging by the aggressively symmetrical hedges and the faint smell of imported perfume, your sock thief is gone, but your foot is beginning to itch. A lot. Florence's streets, after all, are not famous for their hygiene. You sneak past a stone fountain depicting a rather judgmental cherub and slip through a side door, only to find yourself face to face with a laundress. She is holding a wooden paddle and a grudge. "What do you want?" she asks, eyeing your single-socked foot with suspicion. You explain haltingly, and mostly with hand gestures, that you're on the trail of a stolen sock. She snorts. "They always are," she mutters, then shouts something about another barefoot lunatic to someone inside. She softens. Though, when you mention the sack of stolen socks, laundry theft, she says grimly, isn't just petty, it's political. Turns out, Renaissance Florence has deeply entrenched laundry customs. Linen is status. Color fastness is virtue. And socks, oddly enough, are markers of class mobility. A good pair of socks might mean your family owns a loom. A great pair? Probably a dowry item. She tells you about the Société de la Lavande, the unofficial society of washerwomen who sometimes moonlight as informants, midwives, and mild extortionists. They know everything: who's sleeping with whom, whose petticoats aren't getting rinsed, and who might be fencing socks on the sly. One of them, she says, saw a limping scarecrow of a man trading socks near the Wool Guild storage house. You thank her, apologize for dripping on her mosaic floor, and head off, your foot slightly damper than when you started. You descend through alleyways so narrow you can smell 3 types of soap from the walls. Florence smells like lavender, smoke, and fear of papal audits. People stare. A few snicker. One child points at your exposed ankle and makes a faint gagging sound. You try to walk with dignity. It doesn't help that your one sock is starting to slip. A passerby offers you a free fig and suggests you burn the other sock in symbolic protest. That's what we did with my uncle's left boot, he says. Never came back right after the comet. You nod politely. Renaissance street logic can't be argued with. As you turn toward the Wool Guild, you pass a mural featuring what might be a lion, a saint, or someone being chased by an angry sausage. It's unclear. What is clear, though, is that this city takes fabric very, very seriously. Historians still argue whether Florence's obsession with textile regulation was rooted more in economic control or cultural pride. Either way, if your sock has entered the world of the guilds, it's going to be a long day. But just as you reach the edge of the square, someone drops a basket of apples directly onto your foot. The wrong one. The sockless one. You yelp, then laugh a weird, tired sound, because this whole saga has barely begun. And Florence doesn't care. She keeps on turning, slow and smug beneath the Tuscan sun. You hobble through the square, your tender, sockless foot pulsing with apple-shaped indignation. Around you, Florence crackles with its usual intensity, merchants barking prices, friars mumbling half-hearted blessings, and pigeons staging low-key turf wars over breadcrumbs. But you have a mission. Your sock is somewhere out there, possibly smuggled into the underbelly of Florence's textile economy, and you won't stop until your toes are once again evenly swaddled. You reach the edge of the noble quarter, where the laundry lines stretch like ancient telephone wires, heavy with garments, gossip, and the occasional suspicious stain. They flap gently in the breeze dresses, tunics, underthings, and something else. A familiar shape. That sock again. You squint. There it is, dangling from a line tied between two balconies, like it's auditioning for a particularly undignified production of Romeo and Juliet in sock. And beneath it, a courtyard belonging to the Contessa di Bellafuoco, a woman known for her impeccable laundry game and rumored to once have imprisoned a suitor for confusing linen and cotton. You slip through a servant's alley and into the courtyard, where laundry maids crisscross with baskets and stern expressions. One of them pauses, eyeing your uneven footwear. "You're not with the starch boys," she says slowly. You shake your head. Guild inspector. Another head shake. Laundry auditor from Siena. You frown. That's apparently a real thing. She sighs and waves you in. Fine, but don't touch the chemises. The Contessa counts them. You tiptoe through drying linens, whispering apologies to flapping bloomers as you go. A ladder leans precariously against a wall. You scale it, reach out, and just as your fingers brush the edge of your sock, it disappears again, yanked away by a grinning boy on the opposite rooftop. "Oh, come on," you hiss. "How many people want this sock?" From the ladder, you drop unceremoniously into a garden bed, startling a small dog and knocking over a statue of St. Catherine holding a mop. You limp out the gate, dignity reduced to shreds, one sock still firmly missing. Back on the street, you start piecing together a theory. These aren't random incidents. This is organized, calculated, some kind of key Florence-wide sock conspiracy. It sounds ridiculous, yes, but not more ridiculous than the Florentine sumptuary laws, which dictated what fabrics you were allowed to wear based on your social status, gender, and whether or not you'd paid a fine last Lent. Historians still argue whether these laws were intended to reinforce class divides or just to give board officials something to do between plagues. And when it came to laundering these sacred textiles, noble houses were intense, clotheslines were territorial, accusations of fabric theft, or worse, mixing loads could start feuds that lasted generations. One famously bitter noblewoman, Lady Antonia della Spuma, once challenged a rival to a duel because her corset came back smelling faintly of goat cheese. True story. Probably. You wander through an alley lit with late morning sun, where a washerwoman is literally fencing someone with a broom over a mice-identified sock. You offer to help identify it. She eyes you. "Show me your feet." This is apparently a serious forensic procedure. You present your sock and foot. She examines both, then cackles. Too small, she says. This is a man's sock. You explain that your missing one is a man's sock. She shrugs. Maybe he found it first. And then she tells you, offhandedly, that socks left unattended for more than 3 suns' shadows are legally considered public laundry. A common law clause, apparently, written into the bylaws of the La Vendée after the great hosiery dispute of 1498. You blink. Florence is unwell. A donkey cart trundles past, loaded with baskets of damp linens and the faint smell of shame. You follow it. It leads you deeper into the neighborhood of San Frediano, where the laundry gets less delicate and the air more fermented. This is where the linen of the working class hangs proudly over streets yellowed, patched, but meticulously scrubbed. You spot a woman meticulously hanging socks by color, length, and emotional energy. She notices your stare. What she snaps, "Don't you sort yours?" You ask about your sock. She frowns. Describe it. Wool, dark gray, slight heel patch, mild despair. She nods slowly. That sounds familiar, but I don't talk to strangers without compensation. You dig through your pockets. One old button, a licorice-flavored lozenge, and a receipt for a turnip you never picked up. She accepts the lozenge and points across the square. That way, talk to Euphrasia. She has opinions. Euphrasia is perched on a stool next to a steaming washtub, elbows deep in suds. She is approximately 1,000 years old and clearly in charge of everything. She squints up at you. You missing something? A sock, you say. She grunts. We all are, son. Florence eats socks. You explain again your theory. The pattern, the thief, the rooftops. She nods slowly, wipes her hands, and points to a nearby rooftop. Your sock, she says, isn't lost. It's been recruited. That stops you cold. Recruited. Euphrasia grins. There's a war going on, honey, between the soft and the footless. We all pick sides. She's clearly joking. Probably. You turn to leave, but she calls after you. Check the wool guild. Someone's always laundering something over there. You look down at your lone sock. It's hanging in there, sagging sadly. A pigeon stares at it with barely concealed contempt. Florence presses on. Laundry billows like battle flags above the cobblestones. Somewhere, your other sock is out there, and if you're going to retrieve it, you'll have to go deeper into the city's bizarre, bureaucratic, borderline spiritual obsession with fabric. Which means only one thing: it's time to visit the guilds. Again. But first, maybe sit for a second. Your foot is really starting to blister. You sit down on a broken marble bench near a bakery that smells faintly of disappointment and burnt fennel. Your sockless foot throbs like it's composing a small opera about betrayal. A cat watches from a windowsill, clearly judging your life choices. You try not to take it personally. After all, you're a person chasing a sock through Renaissance Florence. There are no good life choices here. Once your foot has recovered some dignity, you limp toward the Wool Guild Arte della Lana, as it was known in the proper scrolls and gossip columns. Florence had a lot of guilds. Bakers, doctors, apothecaries, even notaries had their own. But none wielded quite the same power as the Wool Guild. These were the textile tycoons, the fiber lords, the ones who made Florence's wealth, one scratchy tunic at a time. The building looms like a fortress made of lint. Thick stone walls, arched windows, and guards at the door who definitely skipped foot day at the gym but never missed eyebrow intimidation training. You approach them, offering your best, not a criminal smile. I'm here, you say carefully, to inquire about a sock. They blink. You blink. Everyone blinks. Then one of them lets out a slow sigh and waves you in. Third today, he mutters. Must be the full moon. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of wet wool and bureaucratic despair. You're led down a hallway, past tapestries so complex they could be crime scenes. You half expect a loom to leap out at you with a subpoena. A clerk ushers you into a room filled with piles of fabric samples, ink-stained ledgers, and a stuffed ferret that might once have been part of a hat. Sitting behind a desk is a man who looks like a loaf of bread that studied law, rounded at the edges, but dangerously firm in the middle. "State your wool business," he drones. You take a breath and dive in the rooftop chase, the laundry courtyard, the elderly oracle of suds. You end with a passionate description of your missing sock's emotional significance. The clerk blinks. "Describe the sock." You do. Again. He flips open a ledger and runs a finger down a column titled "Unregulated Hosiery Misplaced." Misidentified or miscreant? He stops. We did receive a report. One dark woolen sock, heel-patched, suspiciously unlabeled, brought in by a street vendor who claimed it was screaming injustice. Your eyes widen. That's the one. Unfortunately, he continues, it was passed along to the Dyers Guild for evaluation. Something about potential dye fraud. You blink. Fraud. He nods gravely. In Florence, socks can be forged. You want to ask how, but something tells you the answer involves boiled urine, 6 hours of chanting, and at least one goat. As you leave the Wool Guild, your head spinning with visions of counterfeit socks and fabric tribunals. You can't help but admire the absurd brilliance of it all. Florence was obsessed with appearances, and textiles were status. A cheap knockoff of a nobleman's sock. That's not just deception, it's social heresy. Historians still argue whether these guilds were protectors of craftsmanship or just aggressively gatekeeping fashion snobs. Probably both. You limp into the street, chasing shadows and the occasional pigeon. A child runs past, holding what might be your sock, but turns out to be a ferret in a wool sleeve. Honest mistake. You stop for a moment at a fountain, splashing water on your aching foot and reflecting on the strange civic machinery of Renaissance Florence. Did they really need this many rules about socks? Yes. Absolutely yes. This was the city where a woman was fined for wearing velvet cuffs too wide for her station, and where one man was excommunicated not for murder, but for unlicensed lace importation. Your thoughts are interrupted by a man yelling, "Behold the Dyers," in a tone that implies fireworks, or at least mild nudity. A parade of guild apprentices goes by shirtless, barefoot, arms stained with streaks of crimson and indigo. One of them is carrying a laundry basket. Inside a sock. Your sock. You break into a weary jog, trailing after the parade as it turns down a narrow lane and into the Dyers' Quarter, a part of the city that smells like vinegar, burnt wine, and crushed beetles. Welcome to the Color District. The Dyers Guild, Arte dei Tintori, was responsible for all the color in Florence, from pale ecclesiastical robes to those deep reds that whispered, "I have money, and the Pope owes me dinner." They guarded their recipes like sacred relics. Some dyes were made from insects, others from lichen. One infamous yellow involved a complicated relationship with cowpea and existential dread. You follow the trail of dyed water seeping down the cobblestones and duck into a low building with steam rising from its windows. Inside vats, fabrics, and people yelling about saturation. A teenage girl in a smock greets you with mild suspicion and an arm full of damp socks. You give her your speech. She eyes your remaining sock like it's a mildly interesting mushroom. Then she pulls out a laundry basket and says, "Pick one." You spot it. Wool, gray, heel patch, emotional damage. You grab it. She stops you. Not so fast. You'll need to pass the color test. The what now? Guild rules. To claim a sock, you must prove its shade has not been altered, forged, or fraudulently imitated. You look at her. She looks at you. Somewhere in the distance, a goat sneezes. The test involves dipping the sock in vinegar, holding it up to the sun, and having 3 elderly women compare it to a swatch from memory. One of them weeps. "It's authentic," she whispers. So much regret in that heel. You are presented the sock ceremoniously. It's warm, it's damp, it's yours. You slide it on with reverence. Your feet, united once more, pulse with a strange pride. But just as you step outside, someone brushes past you. Fast. Too fast. You turn. Your sock. Gone. Again. You let out a sound somewhere between a sigh and a scream. The chase is back on. And Florence, that beautiful tyrant of a city, just smirks and offers you another uneven road to limp down. You hobble after the blur that snatched your sock like it was the holy grail of footwear. Your feet slap unevenly against the cobblestones, one dry, wool-clad step of confidence, one raw, sockless skid of existential dread. Around you, Florence seems entirely too unconcerned. A street juggler is attempting to balance pears while reciting Petrarch. A goat in a hat bleats at a passing monk. Nobody cares that you've just been robbed. Again. The thief is fast, weaving through stalls and street performers like he's done this 100 times. He probably has. You catch a glimpse of him leaping over a basket of artichokes, your sock clenched in one hand like a trophy. You're impressed, and also absolutely livid. You follow him down a twisting alley that smells like garlic, beeswax, and the crushing pressure of unpaid apprenticeships. You reach a tiny piazza just in time to see him duck into an archway under a faded fresco of Saint Sebastian, who looks like he's very much over being martyred. Again. You barrel through the arch, nearly knocking over a nun carrying a laundry basket. She forgives you, with the tired look of someone who's seen things, probably socks, disappear mid-vow. Now you're in the Oltrarno district, the artisan's haven across the Arno River. This side of Florence is quieter, a little less polished, and a lot more inventive. Here, workshops spill out into courtyards, with hammering, dyeing, and sometimes interpretive screaming as part of the creative process. You ask a passing sculptor if he saw someone run through. Skinny guy, wild hair, carrying a sock. You nod eagerly. He grunts. Yep, that's Pippo. Pippo. He nods. Known troublemaker. Believes socks contain messages from the Medici, or the moon. It varies. This tracks somehow. You follow the trail of mild chaos, overturned stools, startled chickens, a girl yelling. That's not your goat, until you reach a peculiar workshop tucked behind an ivy-draped corner. The door reads, Associazione Semilegale delle Calze Irregolari, the semi-legal association of irregular socks. You pause, because of course that exists. You knock. The door opens with a creak that implies long-suffering hinges and even longer backlogs. Inside, the walls are lined with socks, hundreds of them, striped, lacy, ankle-high, knee-length, some hanging on pins like museum artifacts. Others folded reverently in shadow boxes. A few are under glass domes, like they might sneeze. Pippo is there, of course, perched on a stool like a caffeinated crow, your sock resting on his knee. He turns to you, eyes wide with the righteous glow of a man who truly believes his laundry is prophetic. You made it, he says solemnly. You stare at him. Give me my sock. He strokes it lovingly. This sock, it vibrates. Because it's damp, you snap. No, no, he whispers. It hums with the ancient rhythm of the loom. It's part of the pattern. The pattern of me walking around with one sock, you say. He ignores this. I traced its stitches. It matches the warp and weft used only in Medici court slippers. Rare, discontinued, possibly cursed. You inch forward. It was made by my aunt in Lucca. He shrugs. She's part of the weft. Pippo insists on performing a ritual to release the sock's burden. You wait patiently while he lights a candle, chants something vaguely Latin-sounding, and sprinkles nutmeg. You think about tackling him mid-spell, but you're starting to get curious. As he waves a piece of burnt bread over your sock, he mutters, "There's history in these threads." You resist the urge to say, "Yes," because it's an old sock. Pippo finishes the ritual with jazz hands and hands you the sock with great solemnity. You snatch it and put it on immediately. The relief is near religious. Both feet, warm, balanced, whole. "You'll see," Pippo says cryptically. "It's only just beginning. You don't ask what it is. You don't want to know. You nod, say thanks, and back slowly out of the sock temple of delirium. As you step back into the Florence sunlight, the bell of Santa Croce tolls a lazy noon. Your stomach growls. It's been hours, days. Maybe. Time works differently when you're chasing textiles across history. You head toward a street market that smells of roast meat, fennel, and collective bargaining. As you munch on a slightly overcooked sausage roll, You reflect on your journey, the thefts, the guilds, the ancient sock seer with nutmeg breath, and then something occurs to you. What if Pippo wasn't wrong? Not about the Medici moon whispers, obviously, but about the sock being special. You glance down at your reunited socks. They look ordinary, slightly stretched, but comfortable. Suspiciously comfortable. You remember the wool clerk saying they were sent to the dyers because of dye fraud? What if that wasn't a joke? Historians still argue whether textile dyes in Renaissance Florence were more about color, chemical stability, or secret economic signaling. There were entire guild feuds over who could claim the purest indigo, the rarest crimson. The recipe for Florentine green was so guarded it was kept in 3 pieces across 3 churches. What if your sock accidentally got dyed with something important? You finish your sausage roll and keep walking, socked and pensive. You pass a group of students debating Aristotle and the fashion merits of doublets. One of them is barefoot, with a single sock tied around his scroll case. Coincidence maybe, probably not. Another merchant tries to sell you a genuine relic of St. Paul's sandal. You politely decline. You've had enough footwear-related relics for one day. Then, turning the corner into a quieter alley, you see it. Another sock, hanging from a windowsill, identical to yours. You freeze. Either your sock has cloned itself, or this goes deeper than you thought. You reach for it, but a shutter slams shut just as your fingers brush the fabric. You hear giggling from behind the wood. You're not alone in this. There's a network, a movement, maybe even a cult. You sigh, tug your second sock firmly up, and take a deep breath. This story isn't about a lost sock anymore. It's about what that sock represents. And you, my friend, are just getting started. You stare up at the shuttered window like it's just told you your socks have been recruited into a secret society, which, given your day so far, wouldn't even crack the top 5 weird things. The laughter inside fades into a creaky silence, and you're left blinking up at the wooden panels where your sock its twin, or its imposter just vanished. You glance down at your feet, both now swaddled in woolly righteousness, matching, present, dry, but that sock you just saw, identical, right down to the heel patch that vaguely resembles the Pope if you squint and tilt your head. You take a cautious step backward, watching the window, half expecting a pamphlet about sock rights to flutter out. Nothing. Just Florence being Florence, eternally weird and weirdly eternal. You retreat into the alley, brain whirring like an apprentice caught mislabeling blue dye as celestial azure instead of heaven light. Something about this is off. More off than your uncle's claim that Florence was built by giants who love symmetry. More off than Pippo's sock astrology, which, in hindsight, might have made a little too much sense. You wander deeper into Oltrarno, past workmen carving marble, and painters arguing about whether vermilion is too emotional. You keep seeing them socks, not on feet, but draped over balconies, pinned to shutters, even tied to a merchant's donkey cart like some passive-aggressive flag of rebellion. It's not laundry day, it's sock day. Something's up. A group of teenagers giggle as they pass, one whispering, "He's wearing them," and the other shushing her too late. You whirl around. What did you say? The tallest one, all elbows and freckles, shrugs, nothing. You take a step closer. "You said I'm wearing them?" A pause. "Just the socks," she says. The ones you echo. From the list? Oh no." The group takes off down the street before you can ask which list, why it includes your socks, and how deeply you're now in over your wool-clad ankles. You find a bench that probably predates organized religion and sink onto it, trying to remember the last time your life made any sense. You're just a person, with a sock, 2 socks, and now, a mystery. Maybe it's time to visit someone who deals in mysteries. Not Pippo, the man thinks bread can talk, but someone serious. Which is how you end up, reluctantly, at the workshop of the one person in Florence who might be able to decode all this, the eccentric, the experimental, the sometimes exploding genius, Leonardo da Vinci. You tell yourself you're not starstruck as you approach his cluttered, vaguely scorched door. You're definitely not planning how to casually mention the sock thing without sounding like a lunatic. Nope, this is all extremely reasonable. You knock. Nothing. You knock again, louder. A puff of smoke leaks from the cracks. Then, the door creaks open, revealing a young man in a soot-streaked apron, eyebrows missing, and a look that says, "I've just seen a chicken fly on purpose." "Leonardo's out," he croaks. "Testing a flying machine shaped like a lizard. I don't want to talk about it." You blink. "I need help." He sighs. "Does it involve gears, theology, or mystery footwear?" "Yes." He lets you in. The workshop is chaos. Gears the size of carriage wheels. Half-finished sketches of catapults and portraits. A mannequin wearing a shirt made entirely of spoons. And in the corner, an entire board labeled Sockgate with strings. Pins. And what might be your aunt's face circled 3 times. Leonardo's been tracking it. The assistant says, "The sock pattern." You lean in, so it's real. He nods grimly. There's been a rise in sock incidents. Multiples, identicals. Patterns repeating across districts. Nobody wants to say it out loud, but he lowers his voice. Replication. You sit down heavily on a stool shaped like a lobster. Why socks? Why anything he counters? Why did Florence ban short tunics in 1478? Why did someone paint a fresco of a duck riding a unicorn into the apocalypse? Florence doesn't need reasons. It needs style. He pulls a stack of parchment toward you, showing diagrams of sock weaves, dye interactions, and a map of Florence marked with red circles. This, he says, is where the copies are appearing. You recognize several places: the Wool Guild, the Dyer's Lane, the shuttered window from earlier. Each one a dot, each one part of a larger circle. You trace the outline. It's a spiral. You murmur. He nods. The spiral of St. Rosalia, a pattern embedded in the city itself, supposedly used by the original textile guild to hide secrets in plain sight, like messages in socks. Exactly. Do we know what kind of messages? He hesitates. The last one we decoded just said, "Nice try." Right. You feel the edges of your sanity fray, much like your first sock, back when things were simple. Damp, but simple. Still, you have to follow this thread, literally and metaphorically. Where does the spiral end, you ask? He points to the map. Santa Maria Novella. Of course it does. The church where the most powerful families worship, where guilds seal their pacts, where even the Pope occasionally pops in to pray and judge fashion choices. You glance down at your socks, suddenly unsure whether they're garments, clues, or magical Trojan horses. Probably all 3. As you stand to leave, the assistant hands you a sketch. If you see Leonardo, tell him the lizard wings don't flap right. Also, he owes me new eyebrows. You nod solemnly and step back out into the Florentine afternoon, the smell of roasted chestnuts mixing with philosophical dread. You have a destination now. You have socks. You have no real plan, but you're committed. And Florence isn't going to make this easy. You leave the mad workshop of almost flight and eyebrowless apprentices, clutching a hand-drawn map on the back of a wine-stained dinner menu, because apparently parchment is for amateurs. The assistant circled Santa Maria Novella in thick charcoal, with a note beneath it, careful, very echoey. You walk briskly, socks secure, spirit teetering. If this spiral of sock replication really ends at the Grand Church, then your humble wool foot wrappers might be more than accessories. They might be invitations, or warnings, or both, like Renaissance diplomacy. As you cross the Ponte Santa Trinita, the Arno glints lazily under the sunlight, completely indifferent to your unraveling reality. You pass a group of laundresses, hanging linens over the riverbank, singing something heartbreakingly out of tune. One of them squints at your socks and nudges another, who promptly makes a warding gesture with her fingers and mutters, "Oh, he's marked." You pretend not to notice. You arrive at Santa Maria Novella just as the bell chimes 1, a dull, pensive tone that seems less about timekeeping and more about sighing at existence. The church's facade is a checkerboard of white marble, green serpentine, and the knowledge that someone was paid too much to design it. You slip in through the side entrance to avoid drawing attention, which is hard, because apparently wearing the socks is now tantamount to carrying a flaming banner that reads, "Ask me about the secret textile society." Inside, the church is cool and shadowy. Incense lingers. Footsteps echo. You tiptoe past tourists admiring frescoes, scholars scribbling furiously in the margins of prayer books, and one man who appears to be arguing with a statue. You find the spiral? It's not a mosaic, not a fresco. It's more conceptual. Laid into the floor, beneath a row of mismatched pews, is a faint pattern of inlaid tiles, barely visible unless you already know what to look for. The curve of it loops once, twice, then disappears under a stone lectern engraved with two oddly familiar shapes. Socks, left and right, heeled and toed, one slightly shorter than the other, like yours. You kneel beside the lectern and run your fingers over the stone. It's warm. That's not great. Stone shouldn't be warm. Then you hear it, a soft, deliberate cough behind you. You turn. An old man in clerical robes stands a few paces away, squinting at you through spectacles so thick they probably double as magnifying glasses. He leans on a cane shaped like a twisted spindle. "You're wearing them?" he says. "You don't bother pretending anymore." "Yes." He nods slowly, then gestures for you to follow him. You hesitate, but only for the span of 3 mental questions. Is this how cults start? Will I get my eyebrows singed? Can I outrun him if needed? Yes, possibly, and definitely. You follow. He leads you through a side door, down a corridor lined with tapestries of questionable artistic merit, and into a small library that smells like dust, leather, and the kind of secrets that were once whispered under candlelight and now only exist in footnotes. The man pulls out a worn ledger and flips through its crumbling pages until he finds a sketch. He lays it before you. 2 socks, one striped, one plain, intertwined in a spiral. "The weave," he says. You blink. What now? "The weave," he repeats, with dramatic spacing. An ancient pattern, not just textile, not just metaphor, a code embedded in the very fabric of Florentine trade. Of course it is. Historians still argue whether the weave was ever truly real, he continues, or if it was just a myth invented by rival guilds to distract from spice tariffs. But every few decades, the pattern re-emerges. In socks. In socks, he confirms, common, overlooked, easily moved through city lines. So they're smuggling messages. He smiles faintly. Ideas. Not messages. Trends. Warnings. Memories of rivalries long buried beneath marble and dust. He pauses, then adds, also sometimes dye recipes. He turns the page and shows you a diagram. You recognize it instantly. It's the floor spiral from the church, only this version overlays a map of trade routes, guild houses, and pigment vendors. The weave isn't a single place. It's a pattern of influence, a means of control. The socks just delivery mechanisms. You slump into a creaky wooden chair. So, I'm part of this now. He gives a small, solemn nod. The moment you put them on, you take a deep breath. Can I take them off? He shrugs. Only if you want your toes cursed. You glare. Joking? He says. Mostly. You glance around the library. Old scrolls, ink pots, one particularly menacing loom in the corner. You ask, so what happens now? He walks over to a cabinet, pulls out a box, and opens it. Inside, more socks. Dozens. All folded neatly and labeled with little tags, like Weaver's Rebellion, 1459, and Velvet Coupe Attempt. He hands you one with no label. It's bright green, smells faintly of cloves. It hums in your hand. You've been chosen, he says. The sock keeper. Oh no. You try to hand it back? Nope. Absolutely not. He doesn't take it. I'm serious, you say. I don't even fold my laundry. I lose socks like it's a sport. I should not be in charge of anything sock-related unless it involves throwing them into a drawer and forgetting they exist. He shrugs. The weave doesn't care. Great. You hold the green sock. It's soft, perfectly weighted, clearly enchanted in some absurd way that's going to haunt you later. As you turn it over, you spot an embroidered symbol near the cuff, an eye. You sigh. What do I do now? He leans in. Go to the guild archives. You pause. You mean the place with the skeleton key requirements, constant water damage, and terrifying head librarian. He nods. There's a file on sock replication, he says, codename Operation Topocalypse. You exhale slowly, green sock still in hand. I miss when this was just about warm feet. He gives a rare smile. No one in Florence just has warm feet. You stuff the green sock into your satchel, your own pair secure and smug against your ankles. You head out of the church, the afternoon sun slicing the sky into golden fragments. Pigeons scatter, bells toll. A merchant tries to sell you a sock-shaped flask. You decline. You know what you have to do now. You're going into the archives, and you're taking the weave with you. The archives loom ahead, hunched in the corner of a crooked alley like a librarian who's had one too many espressos and isn't afraid to shush. The building has no sign, just a faded sock, carved in relief above the doorway, hanging like a warning or a welcome, depending on your outlook and your foot size. You tug your cloak tighter around you. The green sock rests in your satchel, warm to the touch like a very smug loaf of bread. Your original socks, the ones that began this whole unraveling odyssey, seem to tingle slightly as you cross the threshold. Either it's destiny, or you've got athlete's foot. Hard to say. Inside, the air changes. It's quieter, dustier. It smells like parchment and stern judgment. You step cautiously across the worn marble tiles, each one grooved from centuries of pacing, slipping, and the occasional fainting historian. You don't have a skeleton key, but the sock, naturally, has you covered, literally. As you walk toward the front desk, a podium of sorts, shaped like a very suspicious filing cabinet, a panel beneath your feet shifts. A whir, a click. Then a drawer near the base slides open with an irritated grunt. Inside, a brass medallion, shaped like a sock, of course, with the initials C.G.A. Consortium of Guild Archives. You lift it gently. The lights overhead flicker in approval, or maybe just in protest of yet another chosen one. You press the medallion to the gate. It swings open, sighing as if it's seen too many fools come through these doors. And it has. You descend a spiral staircase into the belly of Florence. The stone grows colder, the walls narrower. You pass shelves labeled Silk Complaints, 1420, 1490, and Wool Guild Secret Feuds. Volume 11 of 39. There's even a section titled Pants Debates Controversies in Trouser Width, which makes you wonder how close Renaissance Italy came to civil war over fashion. Deeper in, you reach the restricted zone. A woman is standing guard, leaning against a wooden post. She's dressed like a librarian who moonlights as a gladiator-sensible tunic, long gloves, and a belt with more keys than strictly necessary. Her name tag simply reads Marcella. Underneath, absolutely not. You approach. She eyes your satchel. You brought it, she says. You blink. The green sock. She nods, unimpressed. About time. Do people usually bring socks here? Only the doomed. Oh, a pause. Some of them get better, she adds. Depends on attitude. You give your best responsible sock citizen smile. She rolls her eyes and turns, beckoning you down a dark corridor where the real files begin. You pass entire aisles dedicated to obscure guild rivalries, like the 2-year dispute between embroiderers and glove makers over whose handiwork deserved altar placement. Spoiler, it ended in passive-aggressive needlework. Finally, you reach a locked chest. Marcella retrieves one of her 5 million keys and opens it with a flourish. Inside a thin folder, handwritten, stamped, label Operation Topocalypse. You open it slowly. The first page features a sketch of a sock. No surprise there, with intricate patterns that resemble both embroidery and encryption. Next to it is a side note. Replication ratio exceeds forecast. Origins unclear. Suspected source, the spindle. You frown. What's the spindle? Marcella leans over. Nobody knows. Some say it's a loom. Some say it's a person. Historians still argue whether it's metaphorical or if it's just hiding under the Wool Guild headquarters, eating stolen yarn. You continue flipping. The report details sightings of identical socks appearing citywide with no traceable production method. Weavers interviewed swore they never made duplicates. Dyers claimed the hues just appeared. One tailor reported waking up to find his entire workshop full of neatly folded, stripy foot garments labeled Beta Batch 12. And then, a line. Subject to 0. Last recorded location, Via de la Matonella, disappeared. The street name tugs at your memory. You've walked that alley, maybe even tossed a coin in the cracked fountain there, and wished for a day with fewer decisions. You glance up. Marcella has already walked off, leaving you alone with the weight of linen conspiracy. Via de la Matonella, that's your next stop. But before you can leave, something else in the file catches your eye, a note tucked in the back, handwritten and unsigned. The socks are choosing again. If you find this, don't trust the green ones. They always go rogue. Oh good, you're already wearing the originals, carrying the green, and now you find out there's a color-coded hierarchy of treachery. You return the folder to the chest, your head spinning with theories, laundry metaphors, and a strange desire to wash your feet in holy water. Back above ground, Florence hums like nothing is wrong. The bells of San Lorenzo chime lazily. A child tries to juggle oranges and fails spectacularly. A dog naps under a cart of herbs labeled definitely legal. You head toward Via della Maddalena. As you reach the alley, something shifts. The street is too quiet. There's no foot traffic, no vendors, just a long row of windows with shutters all slightly ajar, like a gallery of eyes waiting to blink. You move cautiously, stepping into the center of the alley. You don't see the figure until you're nearly past them. A woman in a cloak sits on the edge of a barrel, legs crossed, a single sock striped in crimson and gold dangling from one hand. She smiles. You're late. Do I know you? You know my work. She tosses the sock at your feet. It lands perfectly upright. That's not natural. She hops down from the barrel, eyes glinting. I'm from the Undyed, she says. You hesitate? That sounds like either a rebellion or a fabric softener. Both, she replies. We're the ones who keep the weave honest. She leans in, voice low. The spiral is active again. Someone's accelerating the pattern. Replicating too fast, threads are fraying. Why me, you ask? You wear the originals. You're in the pattern. You're a wild card. Florence loves wild cards. Can you help me? She hands you a scrap of parchment. On it, a series of loom instructions. A pattern you don't recognize until you realize it matches the spiral in the church. Only reversed. It's a counter thread, she says. Run it through a loom, and you'll break the loop. Where's the loom? She nods toward the Duomo. The biggest one. Of course. Because Florence isn't content with small dramas. You tuck the pattern into your satchel beside the green sock. Your next destination is clear. Time to visit the cathedral. And try not to bring about the end of fashion. You head for the Duomo with a strange weight in your step, not from dread exactly, but from something heavier and more fibrous. The pattern from the undyed woman pulses in your pocket like it's trying to stitch itself into your skin. You'd be alarmed if you weren't already past that phase of alarm. You are now in the mildly horrified but politely curious stage of the journey. Florence buzzes around you, like it's got no idea the very fabric of reality might be having a midlife crisis. Street performers juggle things that should not be juggled, including, at one point, a live goose. Lovers whisper to each other beneath archways. And an artist paints a fresco while aggressively debating whether noses should even exist in profile form. And then there's you bearing a sock of questionable loyalty and a parchment full of anti-patterns, staring up at one of the most majestic structures of the Renaissance, like you're about to use it as a sewing machine. The Duomo, or Santa Maria del Fiore, towers above you. Its dome is an architectural marvel designed by Filippo Brunelleschi, who famously convinced skeptical Florentines it could be built without collapsing on their heads. A real feat, considering Renaissance architects had a tendency to promise miracles and deliver lawsuits. You enter the cathedral, the echoes of your footsteps swallowed by the vastness. Stained glass scatters light in fragmented rainbows across the floor, painting your journey in divine disco stripes. The air is cool, slightly perfumed with incense and old wood. Tourists mill around, gawking upward, but no one seems to notice that you're carrying the blueprint to potentially unweave time in your satchel. Good. Let them keep snapping photos of saints. You've got a higher thread count to deal with. You find a stairwell and climb, and climb, and climb. Eventually, you reach the scaffolding just beneath the dome. Here, few visitors tread, mostly because of the heart-stopping verticality and the fact that halfway up, the staircase appears to threaten legal action for trespassing. There, hidden behind a wooden partition that probably predates your entire family line, is a loom. Not metaphorical, not imaginary, just a loom. Ancient, elegant, and judging by the glowing runes in the wood, probably not just for making scarves. It hums faintly, like a distant choir trying to remember its lines. You pull out the parchment. The anti-pattern gleams faintly now, its lines twitching, as if excited. The green sock shifts in your bag, curling around the paper like it's trying to smother it. You separate them quickly. The loom waits. You thread the shuttle with the anti-pattern, though you're not entirely sure what you're doing. You once tried cross-stitching and managed to sew a coaster to your jeans. But this feels instinctive. You begin to weave. As the shuttle moves, something changes. The air thickens. The stained glass light slows, dripping like syrup. Outside, the bells toll, but you only hear the first note stretch across what feels like minutes. Images flash through your mind. Socks multiplying, patterns looping, Florence rewinding, replaying, refracting itself across every fiber of its identity. And then snap. The green sock writhes violently in your bag. You drop the shuttle. The loom jerks. The world tilts sideways for a heartbeat. For a second, you are certain you are not in Florence, but beneath it, like some tangled knot in the city's own hemline. Then everything settles, and you're no longer alone. A man stands beside you, tall, dusty, wearing no socks. He looks confused. You both stare at each other. Hi, you offer? He looks down. Oh, this again. You're part of the loop. He sighs. I was the first. You blink. First to lose a sock. First to find one. In 1459. On the Ponte Vecchio. I picked it up. And I haven't stopped repeating that moment since. Until now. Maybe. You nod slowly. Historians still argue whether the sock loop was intentional or a tragic tailoring accident. He laughs. A dry, paper-thin sound. It was always a test. A flaw in the weave. Something about Florence makes time want to spiral. The sock's just the anchor. You glance at the loom. So if I finish this counter thread, you might undo it, or make it worse, or turn every pigeon in the city into a sentient shoelace. That last one sounds oddly specific. It happened once. Of course it did. You take a breath. Pick up the shuttle again. This time, the loom purrs less like a choir and more like a contented cat on a sunny bookshelf. You weave faster, the pattern falling into place, the tension of the threads matching the rhythm of your heartbeat. As the last strand clicks into place, you hear a soft exhale from the man beside you. Then, he fades. No dramatic sparkle, no fanfare, just gone. You blink. Down below, the cathedral breathes again. The light resumes its normal speed. The bells finish their tolling with a tired shrug. You feel lighter. The green sock is quiet, still, but no longer squirming, possibly sulking. You pack up the parchment, take one last look at the loom. It shimmers faintly and then folds in on itself, vanishing into the shadows of the dome's architecture like a secret tucked back into a sleeve. Time to leave. Back down the stairs mercifully faster, though you still manage to stub your toe on a step labeled Mind the Pattern. Outside, Florence is unchanged and yet entirely different. People move freely. No more echoes. No more strange glances. Just life. Real, unscripted, beautifully unpatterned life. You find a bench? Sit. Pull out the green sock. It looks at you. Not literally, of course, but if socks could convey guilt, this one is composing an apology haiku. You consider what to do. You could toss it, burn it, mail it to a rival city-state as an omen. Instead, you fold it gently, wrap it in parchment, and place it in a small box labeled Possibly Dangerous, Do Not Wear, Unless Desperate. Then you do something you haven't done in a while. You buy yourself a brand new pair from a street vendor who looks vaguely like Marcella in disguise, but you don't ask. You slip them on. No whispering, no glowing. Just warm toes. Florence breathes. And so do you. The box stays with you, tucked into your bag, nestled between a jar of questionable olives and a travel guide that smells faintly of mildew. The possibly dangerous do not wear, unless Desperate Sock lives in quiet exile. It doesn't protest anymore. No squirming, no pulsing, no passive-aggressive folding techniques that suggest it resents your laundry choices. You wander Florence with a renewed lightness in your step. Literally, those new socks are cashmere and ethically sourced from a weaver who swears he once dated a Medici, though the timeline is fuzzy, and he might have meant he dated someone who owned a Medici lamp. Still, you can't relax entirely. Something's different. You notice patterns more. Not just the ones in brocades or tiles, but everywhere. How the cafe tables are arranged in Fibonacci spirals. How pigeons seem to take off in mirrored arcs. How the baker across the street always drops exactly one breadstick every 11 minutes. Coincidence possibly, or maybe your brush with the anti-pattern has changed how your brain perceives the weave of the world. You sip espresso and try not to look too hard at the foam, which is forming a very compelling depiction of a sock-shaped figure winking at you. Nope, not today, Satan. Still, life carries on. And Renaissance Florence does what Renaissance Florence does best, overachieve. There's a parade this week. Something about a patron saint who once turned water into olive oil during a particularly dull drought. People dress in elaborate costumes, throw flower petals, and somehow the entire event is sponsored by a guild of garlic vendors who insist their product cures melancholy. You join the crowd, swept along in the noise and color. Drummers beat a rhythm that rattles your teeth in the best possible way. Children wave paper flags, shaped like tiny cathedrals. A nobleman on stilts recites a sonnet while juggling cantaloupes. In the midst of it all, you spot a face. Marcella, standing under a striped awning, holding a wooden spool and eating roasted chestnuts like it's the most natural thing in the world. She sees you, smiles faintly. You sidle over. Did you know, she says, that chestnuts were once used to make primitive flour when wheat ran low. Entire regions survived off them during bad harvests. You blink. Is that your way of saying hello? She shrugs. I thought it was festive. You accept a chestnut. Everything's back to normal, you say, though the word feels a little too small now. Marcella tilts her head. Define normal. Well, no more time loops. The sock's quiet. Florence isn't folding in on itself like a bad origami dragon. Yet, you frown. Is there something you're not telling me? Marcella sighs. Historians still argue whether the sock epoch truly ended in 1492, or if it merely entered a latent phase. Patterns have memory. Cities do, too. Florence forgets slowly. You nibble the chestnut, which is delicious and mildly accusatory. So, it could start again. She shrugs. It's a weave, not a wall. You fixed one strand, there may be others. Fantastic. You stare out at the parade again, trying to ignore the fact that a float shaped like a giant sandal just winked at you. Marcella glances at your bag, still keeping it. The sock. She nods. I feel like I shouldn't. But also, what if someone else finds it? Marcella gives you a rare, earnest smile. That's the responsible answer. You feel like you've passed a test you didn't study for. She reaches into her coat and pulls out a small, leather-bound book. For you, she says. It's a catalog of dangerous textiles. Fringe content. You probably won't find it in a library. You flip through it. There are entries like the self-replicating shawl of Siena and the itchy cloak of Augsburg. One page is just a drawing of an angry sock with the caption, "Do not engage." You laugh. Maybe for the first time all week. Marcella checks her pocket watch. Time to vanish. Wait, where will you go? Naples. Someone there's been experimenting with reversible curtains. Never ends well. You nod. As she turns to leave, you ask, "Are you in a loop?" She glances back. "Aren't we all?" Then she's gone. The parade continues. Someone hands you a small medal shaped like a sock. You stare at it warily until a child snatches it from your hand and uses it as a kazoo. You let them keep it. No one needs that kind of responsibility under the age of 12. You walk back toward the river. The Arno glints in the afternoon light. Flowing like golden thread through the tapestry of the city, you sit on a low wall and let your feet dangle over the edge. You think about all the things that could still go wrong, but you also think about all the things that just are. Florence is a city of extremes of art and absurdity, of genius and soup thick enough to bounce a spoon. Maybe the sock was never the threat. Maybe the real danger is forgetting how strange and magical everything already is. You lean back, let the sun warm your face. Somewhere nearby, a tailor argues loudly about the ethical implications of silk blends. Someone else sings a lullaby about turnips. A pigeon lands beside you and offers a crumb, then thinks better of it and waddles away with a sneer. You breathe. Florence breathes. The threads settle, and for the first time in a long while, nothing happens. And it is glorious. You return to your little rented room above the apothecary shop where the walls are thin. The floorboards creak in sympathy with your thoughts, and the landlady swears the plumbing is run by tiny water monks. You never quite figured out what that meant. Honestly, you're afraid to ask. Your bag rests on the chair, its lumpy shape reminding you of the box inside. The sock hasn't stirred, not even a twitch. You place a cup of tea next to it, just in case socks appreciate cozy beverages. You never know what counts as hospitality in enchanted footwear etiquette. The light outside softens. Florence at dusk is something else. Everything blushes in gold and pink. The laundry flaps on distant balconies like flags from rival kingdoms. Someone's practicing the lute nearby, badly. But they're improving, slightly. You lie back on the bed, listening to the sounds of the city as they settle into evening mode. Fewer arguments, more clinking of dishes, and quiet laughter drifting up from courtyards. And then it happens. A tap at the window. You sit up slowly, like a horror protagonist who absolutely knows better but opens the closet anyway. There's a figure outside, perched on the ledge like a bird or a particularly dedicated Shakespearean actor. He's wearing a mask, long nose, painted grin, a commedia dell'arte mask. He taps again. You open the window a crack. He tips an invisible hat. Evening, I'm looking for the sock. You blink. That sentence makes more sense than it should. I was told it ended up here. Would be ever so grateful if you handed it over. Who told you? Let's just say the threads talk. Great. The sock has a social life now. You fold your arms? And what would you do with it? He shrugs theatrically. Oh, study it. Possibly unravel the time-locked secrets of the city. Maybe open a boutique line of paradox-resistant slippers. You stare. He chuckles. Kidding. Mostly. You shake your head. Nope. Not happening. His posture changes. Just a little. Less jester. More predator. You really think you've ended it, don't you? It feels ended. Oh, my dear Threadwalker. He leans closer, voice soft and sharp. Historians still argue whether the pattern truly ends or merely pauses until the next tailor picks up the needle. He leaps down from the ledge in a flutter of cloak and melodrama. You slam the window, lock it, then place a chair in front of it for good measure, as if Florence's most flamboyant sock seeker might be deterred by mild interior design. You turn to the box, still unmoving, but you place a hand on the lid anyway, just in case. As if your touch alone could keep the strange woven chaos inside from spilling out again. Because that wasn't just a masked weirdo with a flair for creepy monologues. That was a sign. The pattern isn't done with you. The next morning, you do what any reasonable person would do. When caught in a magical textile conspiracy, you go to the market and buy supplies. Thread, needles, scissors. A thimble that may or may not have once belonged to a nun with second sight. You start stitching. At first, you don't know what you're making. A sampler, a ward, a decorative pillow with passive-aggressive Latin embroidery. But the rhythm helps. The pull of needle through cloth is soothing. Every stitch is like grounding wire for your thoughts. You find yourself humming. Time passes. Outside, Florence spins. Inside, you stitch. And then, quite without meaning to, you embroider a sock. Not the sock. Not even green. Just a sock. Plain. Homemade. Comfortable. You stare at it. There's no glow, no whisper, no surreal flicker of time-bending energy. Just thread, and you. Maybe that's the point. The original sock, the green one, was never meant to be found. It was meant to remind, to jostle people out of their grooves, to keep Florence weird, maybe even to test who noticed the seams in reality and dared to pull them. You pulled one. Now you stitch another, a balance, a loop unlooped. You pin your little sock embroidery to the wall above the desk. Just as a reminder, you don't need magic socks to feel like part of the pattern. You are the pattern. Every clumsy stitch, every wrong turn, every badly brewed cup of tea woven in. That evening, you take the box and walk down to the Arno. You find a little stone alcove near a bridge, half hidden by ivy and thyme. You nestle the box there, behind a carved stone lion that may or may not have winked at you once. You don't destroy it. You don't bury it. You just leave it, not to forget, but to honor it. Because maybe the sock doesn't need to be feared, or worshipped, or weaponized into a line of designer paradox loafers. Maybe it just needs to rest. Like everything else, you walk away, no glowing footprints, no mysterious music, just sandals slapping softly on the cobblestones and the sound of cicadas waking up for their nightly orchestra. Back at your room, the embroidery waits. The tea is warm, the window is closed, and for now, just for now, the only loop you're caught in is the perfect curve of the moon rising above the tiled rooftops. You wake to birds arguing in the rafters. They sound like they're auditioning for an opera one where the plot involves bread theft and unrequited love between two pigeons and a feather duster. You stretch, yawn, listen. Nothing weird. No ghostly sock chants. No surprise time loops. You peek in the corner, half expecting the box to have somehow crept back into your room during the night. But it hasn't. Still gone. Still nestled behind a stone lion who, hopefully, takes his guardian duties seriously. You spend the morning doing very normal things. You brush your teeth with alarming efficiency. You rearrange the contents of your travel bag in order of emotional baggage. You eat toast. The sock doesn't call. Florence bustles, as usual, vendors shouting over one another. Children chasing chickens or the other way around, it's never clear. Artists arguing about whether shadows are a lie. A nun plays dice with a butcher. A cat wins. But as you meander through the streets, something catches your eye. It's small, green, wedged beneath a loose stone on the cathedral steps. Your heart stops. Nope, can't be. You kneel, reach, pull it free. It's a mitten, a tiny child's mitten, fuzzy, with a little embroidered snail wearing a crown. You exhale, half laughing, half ready to combust from residual sock trauma. Still, it gives you pause. Because the pattern, remember, it's alive. It echoes. It finds new threads. You look up at the cathedral, tall, grand, covered in carvings that swirl and twist like lace turned to marble. There's a pigeon with a twig crown perched at the top, staring down like it knows something you don't. It probably does. That afternoon, you pay a visit to the old cartographer's shop tucked behind the olive press. He's still there, still measuring things no one asked to be measured, like the emotional weight of a lukewarm biscotti, or how loud thunder feels at 3 a.m. He nods when you walk in. "Threadwalker," he says. "Thought you'd come back." "I'm not that interesting." You reply. "No," he agrees. "But the sock is." You groan. "I left it." "Did you?" You hesitate. "Yes." The cartographer gestures to the cluttered table. On it lies a map ink still drying, paper still smelling of lemon oil, and long nights. It's a map of Florence, but not the Florence you know. This one shows layers, underground passageways, ghost alleys, secret spaces between buildings that shouldn't exist. And near the river, a glowing dot. "Seriously," you mutter. He shrugs. The box doesn't stay buried, you know. It's got legacy, gravity, like a cursed family heirloom, or a misunderstood love letter from the universe. He hands you the map. It's heavy, heavier than paper should be, like it's soaked with old dreams. "Why give this to me?" "Because you didn't run. I literally tried to flee the city twice." "Yes, but you came back?" "Touché." You fold the map, tuck it into your coat, and leave. Outside, the wind picks up. Not a storm, just motion. Like Florence itself is shifting position slightly, like a city stretching after a long nap. You pause at a fruit stand to buy a pear, and accidentally learn that in 1489, pears were considered a romantic fruit, especially if peeled by a gloved hand. The vendor adds, winking. You thank him and leave promptly. Later, you sit in the shadow of a sundial and unfold the map again. The dot pulses, not ominously, just insistently, like a reminder. You sigh. You really want me to go back, don't you? The map says nothing, but a pigeon lands beside you and nods solemnly. Because of course it does. So you go back to the lion, back to the alcove. It's still there, the box, unopened, unbothered, a little dusty. You stare at it, then sit beside it. You don't touch it. Instead, you talk. I don't know what you want from me. You begin. Or if you even want anything. A pause. I don't know if you're magic, or haunted, or just really poorly designed footwear. Another pause. You ruined my life for, like, 3 days. But you also taught me the city breathes. That time folds. That a sock can bend destiny. You sigh again. This is ridiculous. The box hums faintly. Not ominous. More like a cat purring in a different dimension. You leave it there. No grand farewell. No incantation. No dramatic if I don't come back in 5 minutes. Avenge me. You just walk away. And something shifts. A warmth in your chest. Like you've passed something on, released a weight. Or maybe Florence is just having a good weather day. You don't know what will happen next. If the sock will call again. If another pattern glitch will show up in the form of a sentient scarf. Or an enchanted button that controls fate. But you do know this. You'll notice. You'll be ready. You're a threadwalker now. And every stitch counts. The next day, you wake up feeling suspiciously normal. Your knees don't creak with ancient knowledge. Your hair doesn't spark with residual magic. The sock, so far as you can tell, is still resting peacefully in its riverbank nook, probably entertaining passing water voles with stories of existential laundry. You eat breakfast. You buy soap. You actually return a borrowed book, which shocks the librarian into momentary silence. Maybe you are the magical event of the week, as you step out into Florence's morning blur, dusty light, bells, the scent of bread, and someone yelling about cucumbers. You feel a strange lightness, like your story is catching its breath, which, of course, is when things get weird again. You spot a crowd outside the Palazzo Vecchio, not the usual gawking tourists or local gossip clusters, but a silent, tight semicircle of people, watching something. You inch closer. In the center, a man spinning, not dancing, not flailing, spinning like a top, arms tucked in, eyes shut, mouth moving silently. At his feet, yep, a green sock. Your jaw clenches. You inch forward. Then you recognize him. It's Massimo, the baker's cousin who swore off gluten to become a mystic. Last time you saw him, he was debating pigeons about urban philosophy. Now he's spinning like a vinyl record played by fate. A street sweeper leans toward you. Third one this week, she mutters, eyeing the sock. They all start spinning when they touch it. Then stop. Then cry. Sure enough, Massimo collapses into a crouch, head in his hands, whispering, I saw my mother's laugh in 4D. You sigh, deeply, thoroughly, from your very soul. You crouch, pick up the sock with a handkerchief. You're not stupid, and tuck it into your coat. No glow, no zap, just a faint smell of thyme and wet marble. The crowd mutters. A kid claps. Someone tosses you a fig. You wave awkwardly and leave before anyone asks for a miracle. Back in your room, you lay it on the table. It looks harmless again, deceptively innocent, like a cupcake with a vendetta. You ask it, why Massimo? It doesn't answer. Of course. But you know, the sock doesn't choose targets. It nudges people, finds where a thread is tugging loose, and gives it a little yank. Massimo needed clarity. He got it, via interpretive spinning. You, on the other hand, got something else. A mission. You're the keeper now. Not because you want to be, but because everyone else sees a sock and spins into oblivion. You at least manage to stay upright. You remember what the cartographer said, the sock doesn't stay buried. Apparently not. So you make a plan. Step 1. Containment. You visit the tanner's district, where leatherworkers mumble to themselves in ancient dialects and make wallets that can probably survive both water and emotional betrayal. You commission a pouch. Thick, lined, enchanted, with subtle rosemary stitching. When you say it's for a sensitive garment, the leatherworker nods solemnly. No questions. Step 2. Protection. You stitch another sock. A decoy? Looks almost identical, minus the quantum vibrations. You place it in a second pouch, just to confuse any overly curious cultists or nosy tailors. Step 3. Research. You head to the Biblioteca Nazionale, the restricted section. It smells of dust, forgotten oaths, and eucalyptus. The librarian guarding it wears spectacles like polished moons and asks you a riddle before unlocking the gate. You answer. Laundry never ends, only evolves. She nods. You're in. You read for hours. Ancient textiles with encoded messages. Garments that predicted drought. A 14th century tapestry woven entirely from whispers. Historians still argue whether it ever existed or if it was just metaphor wrapped in wool. You find a footnote in a dusty codex. Beware the green cloth, for it binds not merely skin, but story. Promising. You trace references. Find another clue in a Florentine baker's diary. Circa 1512. Dreamed again of the sock. It warned me about walnuts. I ignored it. Was nearly killed by a falling nut cart. We'll listen next time. The sock has precedent. You begin keeping your own notes. Diagrams, scribbles. One entry reads, sock currently behaving. Do not trust. You create a chart sock activity. Verses. Moon phases. Nothing conclusive. But the sock does hum faintly during waxing crescents. Probably coincidence. You document spin victims. So far, a mystic, a nun, and 2 identical twins who twirled in sync, then spoke only in rhyming couplets for 3 days. You build a theory. The sock isn't evil. It's catalytic. It reveals what's already fraying in people, unweaves the tidy seams they've been ignoring. You also come across a scholarly debate in an obscure textile journal. Historians still argue whether the sock was created by accident or intent, if it's an echo of forgotten magic, or the last prank of a divine tailor gone rogue. You prefer the rogue tailor theory. At night, you hold the pouch and wonder, what if the sock isn't done? What if you're not done? You look around your room. It's cluttered now with notes, thread, tiny maps, pins, a small statue of a sheep holding a lightning bolt gift from a grateful philosopher. You've made a life here, quietly, not just studying socks, living in the margins, reading the patterns. You're no longer the tourist who got caught in a textile spiral. You're a part of the weave now. You place the sock gently back into its pouch. Pat it like it's a sleepy pet. Whisper. Try not to ruin anyone's day tomorrow. It hums once. Cheerfully. You get the feeling it won't listen. It's a week before the sock moves again. Just when you think, maybe it's gone dormant. Taking a well-deserved sabbatical from meddling with people's destinies. It pulls a classic sock move. You're in the corner of a quiet bookshop, flipping through a first edition of On the Viability of Arugula as Currency, when the pouch in your coat begins to vibrate. Not in an aggressive, earthquake sort of way. More like a polite but persistent dog pawing at your soul. You mutter, not now, and press it flat with your hand. It hums harder. The shopkeeper glances up. You smile too brightly and say something about static electricity and warm cheese. They nod, slowly. You excuse yourself and step into the alley, unwrap the pouch, and find the sock glowing faintly green. Again. You hold it like it might either bless your crops or destroy your knees. Okay. You whisper, where to this time? It twitches toward the north. You follow. You pass the Duomo, duck into side alleys, past familiar statues, unfamiliar smells, and one very aggressive ferret trying to steal someone's shopping. As you move, the sock glows warmer, like it's pleased. Of course it's pleased. It's got you running errands. You arrive at a cloistered courtyard tucked behind a crumbling convent. It's quiet, still, overgrown. A fountain trickles lazily in the center, its basin filled with coins, moss, and one extremely judgmental frog. The sock gives one final twitch. Then, nothing. You look around. No cults, no twirling mystics, just ivy and broken sundials. Then you see it. A small girl, maybe 10 years old, sitting on the fountain's edge, crying softly. No adults, no dramatic music. Just a kid who looks like the world forgot her. You approach slowly. "Hey," you say gently. She looks up, wipes her nose with a sleeve, blinks. "Did the sock send you?" she asks. And your brain just kind of gives up. Yes." She nods, like this is totally normal. She explains her older brother used to tell her bedtime stories about a green sock that found lost things. Toys, secrets, sometimes courage. Then he left for some kind of expedition, something about chasing time backwards, which is either poetry or a truly ill-advised field trip. She hasn't heard from him since. So, she says, she came here, to the courtyard from the stories. She's been waiting. The sock doesn't glow, doesn't spin, just rests in your hand, still as breath. You sit beside her, pull it out, offer it. Her eyes widen. She doesn't take it, just stares. "You really have it," she whispers. "I thought it was made up." Most true things sound made up. You reply, without thinking. She tells you about her brother Lorenzo. A genius, she says. Built a sundial that works at night. Once convinced a group of scholars that clouds were just tired angels. He believed in patterns, in invisible threads connecting everything. Sounds familiar? You reach into your satchel, pull out the old map the cartographer gave you, the one that shows layers under Florence. You spread it between you. Her finger darts to a mark near the river. "That's where he said he'd find the door," she whispers. You nod. The sock shudders. "Okay then, time to follow another thread. You and the girl. Her name is Rosetta, by the way, because of course it is set off together. She's small but quick, sharp-eyed, and full of commentary. That statue's nose looks like my uncle's. That pigeon's following us. Do you think the sock likes olives?" You answer all of these with the seriousness they deserve, which is to say, too much. As you near the river, the sock pulses again. You cross a stone bridge, the one with the faded lion heads, and follow the map's markings to an overgrown archway in the retaining wall. Behind the ivy, a door, a real one, heavy, iron-banded, smells like rain and old secrets. Rosetta knocks, because of course she does. Nothing happens. You glance at the sock. It's glowing, but not like before. Softer, less urgent. You reach out and place it against the door. It vanishes, right through the wood. You both stare. Then the door creaks open, not dramatically, just a simple groan, like a very old man getting up from a nap. Inside darkness. You hesitate, but Rosetta walks in without fear. You follow. The air is cool, dusty. It smells like lemon oil and broken clocks. You emerge into a space that shouldn't exist, a small study, filled with books and orreries and strange glowing threads strung from ceiling to floor. At the desk, a man, youngish, wild hair, worn boots, sleeves rolled. Lorenzo. He turns slowly, sees Rosetta, smiles. You don't cry, because that would be too cinematic. But your heart does that weird flip-flop thing it sometimes does when you're watching an old friend realize they aren't forgotten. Rosetta runs to him. He scoops her up. They talk in that half-laughing, half-breathless way that people do when reality decides to throw them a miracle. You step back. Let the reunion breathe. Lorenzo finally notices you. Nods. "You brought it, didn't you?" he asks. You don't need to clarify what it is. He explains. He followed the threads too far. Found the door? Stayed, because he thought the sock would bring someone who understood. Someone who could continue the pattern. "Did it, you ask?" He nods. The sock reappears on the table beside him, still faintly glowing. He pats it gently. "Thought it'd be more dramatic," he says. You grin. "It already spun 3 people into mild psychosis and made me skip 2 meals. I'd say that's plenty." You stay a while longer. Talk. Learn. Not just about Lorenzo's work, his theories on narrative weight, his sock-based string theory, but about the deeper magic hiding in the folds of Florence. Then you rise. Time to go. Rosetta walks you to the door. You give her the decoy sock. She laughs. "I'll keep it safe," she promises. You leave the real one with Lorenzo. He's the threadwalker now. You're free, at least for now. Outside, the air smells like spring and mischief. You walk back through Florence. No glowing, no humming, no pigeons with missions. Just the sound of your own steps, threading lightly through the city. and maybe, just maybe, the faintest hum of contentment from the empty pouch in your coat. Freedom tastes a lot like biscotti. You sit in a quiet cafe near the edge of town, sipping espresso so strong it might qualify as a controlled substance. The sock is gone, properly gone, not just temporarily hiding under your bed or plotting its next existential ambush. It's with Lorenzo now, and Rosetta has the decoy, two halves of a strangely touching sibling saga, neatly tied together by one very persistent piece of hosiery. And you're just you again. Or, sort of. You still flinch when you hear spinning. You still eye laundry lines like they might bite. But for the first time in weeks, you can finish a pastry without worrying it's a secret message from a medieval tailor. Florence feels different now. Lighter, maybe. Or maybe you're the one that's changed. A courier drops a small envelope on your table without a word. It's sealed in green wax, stamped with the shape of a sock. Of course it is. You open it. The paper is thick, the handwriting tight and precise. Lorenzo's. The threads continue to move, but slowly. The sock is quieter now, resting. I think I'll keep it safe. Thank you for being the right person at the wrong time. Or perhaps the other way around. He includes a sketch you, mid-stride, sock in hand, trailed by spirals of thread turning into birds. You tuck it into your coat. Later that evening, back in your room, you do something wild. You sort your own laundry, fold it neatly, pair the socks, marvel at how utterly, gloriously boring they are. You remember the first time the sock vanished, how ridiculous it all seemed. A single lost item turning into a city-wide saga. Now you've seen the seams behind Florence's carefully embroidered normalcy, the people who live in the margins, the quiet magic hiding under cobblestones and behind ivy-covered doors. The city is a patchwork, really, of art and dust, of saints and cheese vendors, of broken clocks and secret courtyards. And now, thanks to one particularly insistent green sock, you know how to read it. You take a walk through the Oltrarno. No destination, just letting your feet follow the rhythm of the street. The buildings glow warm with lamplight. Someone plays a lute badly, but earnestly, from a window above. You pass the old bakery Massimo's place. He's back behind the counter now, twirling baguettes instead of himself. You wave. He salutes with a loaf. You cross the Piazza della Signoria. The statues look less intimidating now, like they've seen you survive a cosmic laundry mystery and decided you're fine. You hear laughter behind you, Rosetta and Lorenzo. Maybe. Or just the city playing tricks. Either way, it doesn't matter. You smile. Then you see her, the old woman from the market, the one who took your sock in the very beginning. She's feeding pigeons beside the Arno, her shawl wrapped tight. As you pass, she glances at you, nods once, and says, "Don't lose the next one." Then she throws a crust to the birds and disappears into the dusk. Cryptic, classic. You shake your head, grinning. Back in your room, you light a small candle, settle into your chair, and pick up a book. No glowing, no humming, just the comforting rustle of pages. And yet, you glance at your laundry basket, all socks accounted for, except one. Top right corner, a tiny hole in a heel, a whisper of green. You sigh, long, deep, philosophical, but then you smile. Maybe it's not over. Maybe it never is. Maybe socks are just better at hiding destiny than we are. Still, you fold that one sock, place it on your shelf, and label it. In case of cosmic emergency wash on gentle cycle, you sleep better that night, not because the magic is gone, but because you know it. Now, you've lived inside its loop, seen how threads fray and weave, how ridiculous things like a sock can tug at your story until it unravels just enough to show you something true. And somewhere, deep under Florence, in a study lit by candlelight and spinning stars, a young man and his sister laugh over a sock that still smells faintly of time. The world spins on, gently, unraveling just a little. You wake to sunlight sneaking past the shutters, warm and honey-colored, as if Florence itself is trying to apologize for all the metaphysical chaos. You stretch, roll over, and for the first time in what feels like forever, you don't immediately check for socks under your pillow. Progress. Outside, The streets are already humming, vendors setting up, bells chiming in distant towers, and the occasional philosophical cat having an argument with a pigeon. Your mind drifts like morning fog over the rooftops. Everything that's happened still feels a bit like a dream, or like one of those late-night Wikipedia rabbit holes that ends with famous footwear-related mysteries of the Renaissance. You stroll out for breakfast, because after weeks of mild sock-induced psychological warfare, you've earned it. Your usual cafe has a table open. The barista raises an eyebrow at you and murmurs, still green with a wink. You don't even question how she knows. You just nod solemnly and sip your cappuccino like someone who's personally witnessed a laundry-based dimensional incident. And then, because your life is nothing, if not consistent, someone approaches. A young man in a wide-brimmed hat, eyes darting like he's misplaced a decade. He pulls up a chair without asking and whispers, "Have you seen it?" You sigh. Not rudely, not fearfully, just knowingly. "What did you lose?" you ask. He leans in. A belt. He hisses. But not just any belt. It was rumored to belong to Dante himself. Woven from goat wool and stubbornness. You stare at him. Then you laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you suddenly realize the sock was never the story. It was just your thread. And now, perhaps, it's someone else's turn to follow their own. You pass the man your half-eaten croissant. Wish him luck. He looks confused, but grateful. As he walks away, you hear him muttering, maybe it was a metaphor, or a portal, or both. You raise your cup. To lost things. To odd quests. To the ancient city that never runs out of secrets. Later, you visit Lorenzo and Rosetta one last time. They've made their study into a kind of gentle museum clocks that hum in counter rhythm. Books that rearrange themselves when you're not looking. And yes, the sock, floating lazily in a glass dome like a jellyfish that grants mild inconveniences. Rosetta runs up and hands you a small gift, a spool of green thread. "Just in case," she says. You tie it to your coat's buttonhole. "Feels right." Lorenzo walks you out. "Do you think it'll ever stop?" you ask. He smiles. "Do you want it to?" You consider that? "No," you say, "but maybe I want it to pause." He nods. "Well, don't fold too tight. Some creases need breathing room." Philosophical sock humor. You've officially heard it all. That night, back in your room, you sit on the windowsill with a notebook. No missions, no glows, just moonlight and scribbles. You write down everything, not for others, but for yourself. To remember the feel of cobblestones underfoot, the hum of destiny in a laundromat, the bizarre magic of being caught in a story you didn't ask for, but somehow needed. The sock changed Florence for you. Or maybe Florence changed the sock. Historians still argue whether textile-based time anomalies count as folklore or physics. But you know better. You were there. You lived it. You end the final page with just 3 words, still unraveling gently. And you are. You always will be. Word count 1032. Wind down final 300 words. Now, slowly, you let your eyes relax. Let the world around you soften like the fuzz of an old sweater, or the gentle murmur of late-night Florence. You don't need to solve anything right now. Not history, not socks, not even why your laundry always comes out with one less item than it went in. Let your breathing slow, in and out. There's no green glow, no sudden twist, just the steady, quiet peace that comes from knowing even the weirdest journeys can come to rest. Even the longest stories can find a pause. And even the most chaotic days can be folded gently away with care. You imagine the streets of Florence at midnight empty, but alive. Lamp posts humming, shutters closed, the Arno whispering to itself. Somewhere, Rosetta is dreaming. Lorenzo is adjusting some tiny gear that may or may not impact time travel. And the sock, it's floating, content, still, no longer lost. And you're here, you made it. A little sleepier, a little wiser, a little more willing to believe that the universe might, just might, be held together by the smallest things. So close your eyes. Let your breath follow the rhythm of old clocks and quiet threads. And sleep, softly, gently. No spinning socks tonight, just dreams.